My name is Cecily, and at 31 years old, I discovered that generosity without conditions is something other people call weakness. For 8 years, I quietly transferred $3,600 every single month into my parents' joint account. I did it because I believed I was holding our family together, keeping a roof over their heads, keeping the lights on, keeping the illusion of a comfortable life in Oakville intact. But on Christmas Eve, sitting at my parents' dining room table while the candles burned low, and my brother told a story nobody had asked for, I stepped away to get my coat from my father's home office and found their finalized will sitting open on his desk. He had left their entire $1.4 million estate, the house, the registered accounts, the non-registered investments, every last piece of it to my brother. My portion was listed as $1, one single Canadian dollar, written in clean black type to prevent any legal challenge. I stood in that quiet home office holding the edge of the desk until the cold clarity settled into my chest. Then I picked up the document, walked back to the dining room, and set it next to the cranberry sauce. Before I go any further, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments. And if you have ever been the one in your family who gives and somehow ends up with nothing, hit like and subscribe. You are not alone in this. I grew up in Oakville, Ontario, in a house with a long driveway and a finished basement and parents who made everything look effortless from the outside. My brother was 6 years older than me and was always the one who made the room louder. Funnier at holidays, more charming with extended family, better at making my parents beam with a particular kind of pride that needed no explanation. Things seemed to arrive for him without effort. I was the one who tried. I worked through high school, paid my own tuition at what was then Ryerson University, and moved into a shared apartment in Etobicoke at 22 with almost nothing. I built a property management and investment company from a single rental unit I had saved 2 years to purchase. By 30, I had a portfolio of residential and small commercial properties across the Greater Toronto Area held under a numbered holding company I had registered called Pemberton Holdings Inc. I drove a sensible car, I made my own coffee, I had never asked my parents for anything. My brother, by contrast, was still receiving money from them at 37. They never seemed to mind. Christmas Eve was the way it always was. My sister-in-law sat across from me cutting food for her 2 children and making careful, well-aimed comments about how I still hadn't settled down. My brother sat beside my father cracking jokes and refilling glasses. I sat at the end of the table saying very little, which had long since stopped bothering me. I had learned to be quiet in my family's presence. It was easier. When I stepped into my father's home office to retrieve my coat, the room was dim and still. I wasn't prying. I reached for my coat on the chair and the words at the top of the document spread across his desk. Last will and testament. My name appeared about a third of the way down. I read what followed. $1 explicitly stated to prevent any legal challenge to the estate. I stood there for a minute and a half, maybe 2. The feeling that moved through me wasn't grief, exactly. It was something more like watching a puzzle click into place and recognizing that the picture had been wrong the entire time. I carried the will back to the dining room and set it on the table. My father saw it first. His face went a color I had no name for. He stood up and told me I had no right to go through his private papers. I said it was sitting open on his desk. He straightened his posture and looked at me the way he always looked at me when he wanted me to feel small. My brother was the head of this family. He had a wife, 2 children, a trajectory. I was a single woman obsessed with her rental units. I didn't need it. My mother said I was being selfish. She waved her wine glass in my direction and told me I was ruining Christmas. My brother leaned back in his chair with a small smile I recognized from 30 years of watching him get away with things. My sister-in-law sat very still, and she looked like someone had just handed her a gift. I asked one question very calmly. Who did they think had been sending $3,600 every month for the last 8 years? My father said that had always been understood as a loan, that I had known it from the beginning. I had not known anything of the sort. I had never signed a loan agreement. I had never been given a repayment schedule. I had wired the money because they asked, and because I believed it was what you do for the people who raised you. I told them I understood completely where I stood. Then I put on my coat, said goodnight, and walked out the front door. The December air in Oakville at nearly 11 at night is very still and very cold. I sat in my car for exactly 1 minute. Then I opened my banking application, navigated to scheduled transfers, found the recurring transaction I had set up when I was 23 years old, and canceled it. The confirmation screen asked if I was certain. I pressed confirm. 8 years of automatic monthly transfers, done. I drove home. The silence lasted the entire month of January. My parents didn't call, my brother didn't text. My sister-in-law, who had never been warm toward me to begin with, was completely absent. I went to work. I closed 2 acquisitions. I reviewed leases and quarterly reports, and let the quiet settle around me like something I had been owed for a long time. I knew what they were waiting for. The first of the month. The 2nd of February, my phone lit up at 8 in the morning with a text from my mother. No greeting, no Happy New Year. Just, the property taxes and maintenance fees are overdue. Please transfer the funds by end of day. I stared at it. Then I typed back, I'm not the bank, transfer request declined. She called before I had even set the phone down. I let it ring twice, then answered. She didn't say hello, she asked what game I thought I was playing. I told her I wasn't playing anything. I had canceled the transfer in December and had no intention of reinstating it. She said I had a duty as a daughter. She said my father had given me everything. She said I was throwing a tantrum over a piece of paper, and that my brother needed that financial foundation more than I did because he was building something real. He was about to launch a major investment, she said. He had secured preliminary backing, he was in negotiations, he was finally stepping into his potential, and I was trying to tear him down out of jealousy. I asked what exactly he was investing in. She didn't have a specific answer. My father took the phone. He used his formal voice, the one designed to make people feel like they are being spoken to from a position of great authority. He told me I would transfer the outstanding balance by end of business or I would be removed from his life permanently. No holidays, no contact, no estate. I reminded him there was no estate for me to begin with. He said that could change, and that it depended entirely on my willingness to be a cooperative member of this family. I thanked him and ended the call. My brother texted me that afternoon. The message was long. He said my mother was crying. He said he was stepping up to manage the family finances personally. He said they didn't need my money or my attitude. He said he had always known I would pull something like this, and that he felt genuinely sorry for me. I read it twice. My brother had no liquid capital. I knew this the way you know things about a person you've watched closely your entire life. He had been propped up by our parents for years, and our parents had been propped up by me, which meant the entire structure was built on a foundation he couldn't see and didn't understand. About 2 weeks later, my property management dashboard sent me a priority alert. Pemberton Holdings Inc. maintains monitoring on all properties in its portfolio, including a residential property in Oakville that I had quietly added to the portfolio 8 years ago under circumstances I had never explained to my family. The dashboard was showing a cluster of hard credit inquiries tied to the property address. A title search request had come in through a mortgage brokerage in Brampton. Someone was running the property as collateral. My brother had no idea he was trying to leverage a house he didn't own. He called me the following afternoon using a voice I recognized, his executive voice, the one he had built carefully over years of pretending to be further along than he was. He said he was taking responsibility for the family now, that his mortgage broker had flagged a minor title issue from years ago, something from an old refinancing, and all he needed was my signature on a straightforward release form so he could access a home equity line of credit to fund his new venture. I asked how much he was borrowing. He said the initial draw would be $350,000 Canadian, and the full approved limit was $480,000. I told him I would need to think about it. He said I had 48 hours. I called my attorney the moment I hung up. I asked her to monitor the application and alert me when my brother's file reached a critical point in the approval process. She said he had already submitted paperwork to a Schedule A bank and separately to a private mortgage lender operating across Ontario. She said when the title search completed, it would show Pemberton Holdings Inc. as the registered fee simple owner of the Oakville property. There would be no question. I asked her to let the applications proceed. She was quiet for a moment. She said she wanted to make sure I understood that I was allowing him to continue submitting financial documents that contained fraudulent representations about ownership. I said I understood exactly what I was allowing. 8 years ago, my father had leveraged the family home to invest in a luxury renovation business he was certain would make him wealthy. The business failed, quickly and completely, in the way things fail when the person running them has more confidence than competence. He stopped making mortgage payments. Not reduced payments, nothing. For 14 months he paid nothing and told no one. I found out by accident. I was running a search on distressed properties across the GTA for Pemberton's acquisition pipeline. I typed in our Oakville postal code on impulse. The property was listed under power of sale proceedings, 90 days from public auction. I could have written him a check to clear the arrears. But I knew my father well enough to know that any money I put in his hands would be used to sustain exactly the kind of decisions that had created the problem. He needed someone to step in and stay in. My attorney contacted the lending institution on Pemberton's behalf. We purchased the mortgage note at a significant discount. The title was transferred to my company through a properly registered instrument with the Ontario Land Registry. My parents were permitted to remain in the house as occupants. In exchange, I set up the monthly transfer to cover property taxes, insurance premiums, and ongoing structural maintenance, framed to my father as help with the mortgage so he wouldn't have to confront the fact that he had not owned the house for nearly a decade. He called it his arrangement with the bank. He had been my tenant all along, my mother too. And every dollar that anyone in my extended family had attributed to my brother's generosity, every cent that had apparently made him such a devoted son over the past 8 years, had come directly from me. I found that out from my aunt. She called me in late January, absolutely furious. She said my brother had been carrying our parents for nearly a decade and I was destroying everything he'd built out of pure spite. She told me she was standing in my mother's kitchen right now and that my mother was a wreck. I let her talk. Then I asked her to be specific. Had my brother been making the monthly payments on the Oakville property? She said of course he had, everyone knew this. I sat very still with that for about 5 seconds. My parents had been taking my money every month, quietly redirecting the gratitude, and letting my brother receive credit for a sacrifice he had never made. At barbecues and birthday dinners and every Christmas I had attended for 8 years, my brother had been praised for his generosity, and I had been politely tolerated as the cold, career-obsessed daughter who had never really given anything back. They gave him my sacrifice like a gift they had wrapped themselves. I thanked my aunt. Then I blocked her number, and the number of every other relative who called that week to tell me what a disappointment I was. My attorney called mid-February. My brother had moved forward with the private Ontario lender. He had signed term sheets. He had represented himself as the beneficial owner of an estate held in a family trust. He had received an advance of $85,000 and had already spent most of it. She had documentation confirming the wire transfers. She asked how I wanted to proceed. I asked her to prepare a notice of account, a standard statement from Pemberton Holdings showing the occupants of the Oakville address were 60 days in arrears on their monthly maintenance contributions, with a $50 administrative late fee. Send it to my brother's lawyer. She asked if I was certain. I told her I needed him to read it and think it was a joke. The notice went out on a Tuesday. My brother's lawyer, who operated out of an office near Bramalea and whose website prominently featured a testimonial from 2018, did not pull the Ontario Land Registry title before responding. He called my attorney and told her the statement from Pemberton Holdings was a transparent bluff from a bitter sibling and that his client would be exploring harassment proceedings. My brother called me that evening and he was laughing. He said my little stunt with the fake company had confirmed, in his lawyer's professional opinion, that I had absolutely no legitimate standing. He said I had one more chance to sign the release and do the right thing by this family. I told him I hoped the renovation on his new office was coming along well. He went quiet. Then he arrived at my office. He came on a Thursday morning with my sister-in-law, unannounced, while I was midway through a call with a developer in Hamilton. They pushed past my assistant, A composed, capable woman who had worked with me for 4 years and whom I later quietly thanked with a bonus and positioned themselves in front of my desk. My sister-in-law looked around the office with an expression designed to diminish. My brother slid a document across the glass. It was a transfer of title form with my name on the transferor line and his on the transferee line. He had attached a yellow sticky note with an arrow pointing to the signature block. He said the lender had flagged a title defect, something from 8 years ago when the property had changed hands. A minor clerical issue. All he needed was my signature to clear it, and the funds would flow within the week. My sister-in-law said I had spent long enough playing businesswoman, and it was time to let my brother do something real for this family. I picked up the document and read it from the beginning. Then I walked to the shredder in the corner of my office, fed the pages through, and watched my brother's expression move from composed to purple in roughly 4 seconds. He threatened to sue me. He threatened to call my clients. He threatened to make things very difficult for me professionally. I pressed my intercom and asked my assistant to contact building security. I told him he had no case and no collateral, and he should start making phone calls, because the clock on his private lending agreement was moving faster than he understood. My father left a voicemail that night. He said my brother was trying to build something real, and I was sabotaging it out of jealousy. He said if I didn't sign the release within 24 hours, I was permanently removed from this family. No contact, no holidays, no place at any table he had anything to do with. I saved the voicemail to a secure folder and forwarded it to my attorney. My sister-in-law found me outside a coffee shop near my building 2 days later. She had used a borrowed phone so I wouldn't see it coming. She looked nothing like the woman who had sat in my office and told me to stop playing businesswoman. Her coat was wrinkled. Her eyes were swollen. She stood in front of me on the sidewalk and told me the lender had discovered the title discrepancy and was threatening to recall the full advance immediately. She said my brother had already spent the money. She said their children had nothing to do with any of this. She said if I didn't transfer the property and let the deal close, the lender would sue them for fraud and there would be criminal implications. She said they had nothing left. I looked at her for a long moment. I said I was sorry to hear that, and that the occupant account for the Oakville address was now significantly in arrears and the notice to vacate deadline was approaching. I got into my car. The invitation came 12 days before the eviction notice expired. Thick cream cardstock, embossed lettering. My parents were hosting a dinner to celebrate 40 years of marriage. Friends, neighbors, select business associates. The evening would close with a formal announcement about the family's future, and, in italics at the bottom, a ceremonial transfer of the family home to my brother to be witnessed by those gathered. The business associates were the private lenders. My brother was trying to show them the asset in person, let them feel the weight of it, give them a reason to hold off on recalling their advance. He was planning a ceremony to inherit a property he was being evicted from. I RSVP'd attending. I wore a deep navy suit I had bought for a conference in Vancouver. I arrived after most guests were already inside, which meant the rooms were full and the sound of the event had reached the kind of pitch that makes a sudden silence feel enormous. Neighbors from the street, friends from my parents' golf club, 2 of my aunts, and near the back of the main room, 4 men in suits that were too formal and too dark for a family celebration, standing with the particular stillness of people who are waiting to be reassured about money they are owed. My sister-in-law saw me first. She went absolutely still. My father noticed me about 3 minutes later. He recovered quickly. He has always been better at performing than at anything else. He tapped his glass at 9:30 and the room quieted. He gave the speech I had been expecting. 40 years, a family built on hard work and love, a legacy worth protecting. The importance of knowing when to pass something forward. He spoke about my brother the way he always had, as though the story of my brother's life were something my father had authored himself and was proud of. Then he looked at me. He used the language of condescension dressed as compassion. He said sometimes the pressures of a career-driven life could close a person off, that he had prayed for me, that he hoped one day I would find my way back to what mattered. My brother started up the staircase with a folder under his arm, ready for his moment. I walked forward and picked up the small remote I had brought in my bag. I had made a straightforward arrangement earlier that week with a neighbor 2 streets over who manages audiovisual equipment for corporate events and who had needed a professional contact in the property management sector. The large flat-screen television mounted beside the staircase was connected to a device I had dropped off that afternoon. I pressed the button. The holiday slideshow my parents had set up on the screen disappeared. What replaced it was a registered document from the Ontario Land Registry. Registered owner Pemberton Holdings Inc. Property address, the Oakville House, transfer date, 8 years prior. The room went quiet in a way I had never heard a room go quiet before. I said, 8 years ago this property was 90 days from power of sale. My father's renovation business had failed and he had stopped making mortgage payments without telling anyone in this family. I found the listing while running a property search for my company. I purchased the mortgage note through Pemberton Holdings Inc., and the title was registered in my company's name at the Ontario Land Registry. For 8 years, my parents have occupied this house as tenants of a property that belongs to me. I have covered the property taxes, the insurance and the maintenance every month without interruption. I looked at the 4 men near the back wall. I said, my brother has represented to you that this property is held in a family trust and that he is the beneficial owner. That representation is false. This property is registered to my company. Any security agreement he has asked you to execute against it is founded on a fraudulent claim of ownership. All 4 of them had their phones out before I finished the sentence. My brother said something. I couldn't hear it clearly over the sound of the room beginning to come apart. And then the folder slipped from under his arm and landed on the stairs with a flat, quiet sound. The guests began to leave the way people leave when something has gone wrong and they have no desire to be witnesses to it. In pairs, quickly, with careful expressions. The lenders spoke in a tight cluster near the front door. One of them made a call. 2 of them photographed the document still displayed on the television screen. My brother was not taken away that evening. Mortgage fraud investigations in Ontario move on a timeline that has nothing to do with the urgency of a family dinner, but the complaint was filed before the week was out, and a civil action followed shortly after. The eviction notice expired 8 days later. My attorney attended with a process server and 2 sheriff's deputies on a Tuesday morning in February. My parents had not packed. They had decided, I think, that refusing to acknowledge reality was the same as making it stop. It was not. The deputies gave them 45 minutes to collect personal belongings. My parents left with 4 bags and a box of photographs and no plan beyond the driveway. They came to my office the following Monday. My father's posture was unfamiliar. He looked like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had finally been asked to set it down. My mother was crying before she reached my desk. My father said I had made my point. He asked me to allow them to stay in one of my rental units. He said they had nowhere to go. I said, you left me $1. He said that had been estate planning, that it wasn't personal. I said I understood and that what I was about to do wasn't personal either. I pressed the security button under my desk. The Oakville property sold 4 months later to a developer assembling land on that block for a townhouse project. The number on the closing statement was higher than I had projected. I directed the proceeds into 2 new acquisitions in Hamilton and increased Pemberton's capital reserve. My brother's fraud investigation continues. My parents are renting a unit in Mississauga. I have made a deliberate choice not to look into who is helping them cover the cost. I have a condo in Toronto with large windows that face east. I have a company I built from a single unit and a great deal of early morning stubbornness. I have not spoken to my family in 7 months. And I want to say something honest about that silence. It is not empty. It is the most peace I have ever sat inside. My father believed that loyalty was something you could take without asking and withdraw when it no longer served him. My brother believed he deserved an inheritance he had never worked toward. My mother believed that a daughter's role was to give without limit and be grateful for the opportunity. What I know now on the other side of all of it is that the most important thing I ever did was not the monthly transfer, not the title purchase, not the eviction. The most important thing I ever did was walk out of a Christmas Eve dinner with my coat on, and the clear understanding that I was not required to fund my own disappearance. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to cancel the transfer. The guilt will come. It will arrive in the quiet and tell you that family means enduring whatever they choose to take. It is lying. If you are the invisible one in your family, the one who carries everything and appears in no one's story, I want you to hear this. You do not owe anyone your silence. Drop a comment and tell me your story. Hit like if you have ever had to choose yourself, and subscribe, because the daughter who stops being invisible has a lot more to say.